spoke about the importance of mismatch and interventions to target mismatch. On behalf of the listener, it might be helpful to give some examples of what we're speaking about here. So, if we were to take physical activity and nutrition and sleep as three examples, then what are the kinds of different inputs to their biology that our distant ancestors would have had that nowadays we might be lacking? So, in the case of physical activity, for instance, people were mostly active outdoors in nature with other people. I wonder if you could spell out a few of those things for those three categories.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you just used that word, categories, because we can think of diet, exercise, sleep, and other things as things, and truly they are categories of information that contain a tremendous amount of ideas within them. So let's just look at physical activity. You can look at assessments of hunter gatherers and how much they moved, because theoretically they represent a population that is more reflective of our ancestors and what lifestyles were like for them. And of course, our biology is going to be calibrated. So the sort of expectations of our biology for movement are going to be calibrated by how much our ancestors needed to move to survive. And, it was back in a more natural environment, you had a very careful calibration between the amount of energy that you spent finding food and the amount of food that you could actually acquire. You did not want to go waste a lot of energy, because that might mean you weren't able to sustain your body because you couldn't find enough food. This is the optimal foraging theory. And so hunter-gatherers, if you look at their patterns, not only were they outside in a particular environment, navigating over a particular type of terrain, but for survival, some were doing a lot of gathering, a lot of movement throughout the day, low intensity, constant movement. They probably worked about 20 hours a week total, which is not that much. So there was a lot of rest that did occur. We do see signs that dancing was a part, interestingly, of most tribes as a way of promoting social cohesion and to create possibly ecstatic states. So it's interesting, there was some surplus movement that wasn't directly aiding in survival, but was seeming to add to the tribe. It might be one of the reasons why us finding music and going to concerts creates these, noetic and, these experiences that create bliss and this almost mystical experience for humans. But then going back to movement, it was not just the quantity that we can assess over the time, but it was what did that movement look like? They were carrying, lifting, throwing across their week. What did that pattern look like across the day? Did they sit all day and then get up and then cluster all of their movement into a workout around finding food and then go back to a chair? How much was their physical structure? What were the different positions that their physical structure would be in across a period? Then at night, what did they sleep on? What were the positions that they slept in? What was the temperature of the environment that they slept in? And how was that supported through things like the huts that they would build and fires that were nearby? What about patterns of sleep across a lifetime? So certain populations staying up later, where their first responsibility was perhaps to watch, like a young adult was to watch the tribe. Other people would wake up in the middle of the night. There's the sentinel hypothesis by Frederick Snyder, which suggests that within a population of people, there's always somebody up to watch out for predation on that tribe. And this is not done by assigning some poor individual to the night watch, but happens biologically. You have older people that now have their timing of their rhythm shifted so that they wake up very early and they go to bed earlier. And if you look across all of those different patterns within a group of people, there's somebody that's always up. And so with modern pressures of today, we might try to constrain everybody to sleep between 10 and 7 in the morning. And for some people, that might not work at all. We also have try to get our exercise in, but you don't have that much time. So we're doing a lot of high intensity interval training because we find that there's some efficiencies there, but it's not a complete style of movement. On and on and on. But you start to see how we now have to try to understand all of the things that matter for a human body to maintain that homeostasis, that balance, and not be in some sort of allostatic state. And we can't be perfect, but we can do a lot better. You know, you've heard me talk about this before, why I invented in-tune training, stands for integrative and opportunistic training. And the idea of it was, how do we just move more during the day? So after this call, I'm going to do 30 bodyweight squats and probably 20 push-ups. And that won't be my complete workout, but I do this. I mix in movement in my day. And you know what? Sometimes I forget to do it. I'll have stretches of time and then I'll rediscover my own model and I'll be like, why haven't I been doing this? I feel better in my day when I move that way. So yeah, we have to like get these almost gross approximations. And Josh Turknett, my author collaborator, created a really cool model called the quadrant model, which is then looking at how do we then think about therapeutic intervention. So obviously getting as close to these natural patterns of movement probably offer the greatest benefit. But then we have tools and techniques like the keto diet, high interval training, high intensity interval training that may help put us in a state that is important for our physiology more frequently than we would otherwise if we were just acting according to natural modern forces, sitting in a chair all day. Then we have things like supplementation, and then finally we have drugs. And there's a place for all of those interventions in the quadrant, but when you use them and what you use first is going to depend on, you know, trying to align ourselves with reducing mismatch as much as possible, first and foremost. And now there's just a tremendous amount of technology, you know, glasses that I shared with you the other day that were that shine light down, you know, that are 500, 1,000 and 1,500 lux. Is that better than sitting in a room that is otherwise, you know, 200 lux for throughout my morning? Maybe. Wearing blue blocking glasses at night to counteract the electrical light that we get at night and from screens. There's so much. It becomes really challenging. You see how much of a challenge it is. And that's why I don't think we can do this with passive engagement. We can't do it simply through observation, reading Twitter, looking at newsletters. It has to be a process of personal development to figure out what are the trade-offs that you care to make in your life so that you're not Brian Johnson with a sole dedication to health over your waking period, but actually are somebody who is like, I've got other pressures and demands in my life, and this is where I understand my opportunities and what I can do, and this is where I currently decide to calibrate my efforts to so that I'm having high quality of life. Anyway, that's sort of a big answer to this, but it comes down to back to the what's actually needed to make progress when there's so many different determinants that matter, and understanding your relationship with them so that you actually feel confident in your approach.
You mentioned the Sentinel hypothesis there. I will be sure to link to your interview with David Sampson on
Thank you.
Human OS Radio, which was terrific. I'll also link to a Human OS episode with Herman Ponce, which I think is very relevant, which I did. Yeah. So the first ever times when I was on this side of the mic was while I was working with you at Human OS. And I very much enjoyed that, hence the realization of this podcast. But Herman is a great person to speak with about these subjects. And I'll also add a link to one of Josh's talks about how to win at Angry Birds, which describes that for quadrant model. And to fill one gap, which is a nutritional one, just to give some examples, those might include eating a diverse array of minimally processed foods with other people, ideally during the daytime and early evening. And obviously, if you think about our ancestors, then generally food intake was coupled to physical activity. And sure enough, physical activity seems to in many ways improve people's metabolic responses to food intake. So with that, Dan, I thought we might close with a series of rapid fire questions.
Yes. Here we go.
These follow very naturally from what we've been discussing today, obviously. But the first is, what music do you find yourself working to at the moment? I'm looking for tips.
Okay, I am listening to Green Velvet, a DJ, old school, been around for a long time.
Yep.
He just recently DJ'd at the Concourse Project, which is a event space that's like 12 minutes from my house. It's a really awesome club, and I've got a small circle of friends who I adore here in Austin that like electronic music like I do, and so we try to go out. And that it's counter to a lot of advice. You stay up later. I don't drink or do substances when I'm out. I just listen to the music and dance. But I think it's a trade off that I make willingly, because it is something I look forward to. It's something that I reflect on and reminisce with my friends about. And then, but anyway, he was at the Concourse Project recently, and they have recently published his set, and it's awesome. So that's in the ear pods right now. And the other one is that, as you alluded to earlier, I recently turned 50 years old. I threw a large party. I threw a large party for my friends, and I had DJs come in from LA and San Francisco, and we recorded those sets, and we put them up on YouTube under the Electric Cactus Garden, and they are awesome. And I listen to those pretty much on repeat every day. It was really, really a good time. So those, Chris McGarry, Paul Smith, Julie Drazen, really, really great DJs and good memories too.
I like Green Velvet too. And
Yeah.
I've also listened to all of those sets. My personal favorite is the DJ Game Time one. So on that subject,
Chris.
who would you rather play back to back with? DJ Game Time,
Ooh.
Nick Warren, or yours truly?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm outclassed in each of those three examples. So I'd have to go either earlier or way later when everybody's going home. They just want to, a little more music from folks.
It would be Nick Warren. It's okay, Dan. You can say
Nick Warren. Yeah, he's amazing.
That is the coolest option. What's your favorite live music? Yeah, correct. What's your favorite live music event?
Good question. I guess I have to say Burning Man.
I thought you might say that.
It's been a long time. It's been 15 years since I've gone, but it's the event that is most immersive and different than anything else. It's also expensive, really hard to get to, not very comfortable, but the amount of effort that people put into the art projects and the camps is really inspirational. So you leave that type of event feeling inspired and creative, and that can really carry with you for the rest of the year. What I've been pursuing more recently is smaller events that are easier to get to, that have food there. There's a lot of conveniences to them. But I recently went to one here in Texas for the eclipse, and unfortunately it was shut down early due to weather. But I got to see some really fun DJs, and just being in that environment's always wild and stimulating, and it's just fun and crazy. So that was the most recent one.
House or techno?
What time of night is it?
What? It's 1 a.m.
Sounds like a perfect transition, in fact. So, one DJ that I've really, really liked actually recently is Charlotte DeWitt. She's a techno DJ that plays like a combination of techno and trance. And she brought me back into that style of music simply by the construction of her sets. So she's just really talented, in my opinion. And I usually seek out sets that she does, and she's traveling around the world constantly. But when I put them on, it's like really good music to work to, because it absolutely raises my energy, and I can still focus because there aren't lyrics. So I'm like, if I'm writing and listening to Charlotte DeWitt, I'm really in my happy place.
Mill Valley or Austin?
Ooh, well, I'm going to say both, because that is how we've chosen to live. What I mean by that is I really love Austin. It's fun. It's got great food, and it's easy to get around. So everything's within 15 minutes. It's great for families, and I like the people a lot. It's friendly, and it's diverse. So my group of friends, I've got people that work in the music industry, people that flips homes, some people in tech, lawyer, education. Mill Valley is great, and there's a lot of very successful people, but a lot of tech entrepreneurs. And I don't know, they can be lampooned and whatnot, but they're wonderful people too. I just select my friends based off of who they are, not what they do. But I do like the diversity here. And then over the summers, we leave and go back to California. I get to see friends and family. I get to enjoy that beautiful part of the world. And so I prefer this dual location living than one over the other. And I'm pretty happy with how we have it set up now, where most of our time's in Austin and we go back to California for the summers.
That's two pretty great places to be.
Yeah.
This is the most difficult question of all. Dan's plan or Desmond's plan?
Ooh. Desmond's plan. He's the future. He's the future. He understands social media and all these coming waves. He's native to all this stuff. So I'm going to invest in Desmond's plan.
Good man. V60 or espresso?
I mean, I make a homemade pour over. I finally got it down. It took a long time. I had to reject it just all looked so ridiculous to me that everything had to be perfect in this right temperature and pour at this pace. And I just continually made one bad cup of coffee after the next. And then finally I just followed what they told me. And I was like, that's actually a pretty good cup of coffee. So now I know how to do it.
Okay. Fitbit or Oura?
Oura.
Ooh.
I know. But for reasons that have to do with how much I think those respective ecosystems are pouring into their product now. Because I've been a user of Fitbit since the very beginning, I saw a lot of growth in that company. So incremental progress from every iteration that came out, making it a little bit less friction, a little bit of better user experience, a little bit better construction. And eventually, like the last couple of devices that I've had were not working as well as ones from even years ago. They weren't syncing. They took away functionality and features. It's still a really good device. And for $55, if you get an Inspire, that's a very accessible tool that helps you monitor. There you go. Mine is charging. That helps you monitor important things. And funny enough, they're great. It didn't need to add a lot of functionality for it to be valuable. It's about as good of a tool as it was 10 years ago. All I wanted to do is work well and last long and tell me my steps and give me some approximation of my sleep timing. And that's all I've ever really cared about. And that's what I still pay attention to. So both are really good. Oura does some cool stuff now with summarizing your last quarter of what your sleep looked like, what your stress looked like, what your HRV was. And I appreciate that. It feels like a good innovation to say, now, historically speaking, over the last couple of months, this is how you've done. And I think that's a nice advancement. That's why I wear both.
You love a gadget. Zone 2 or lone poo?
This is a popular conversation right now. And I am still negotiating my relationship with Zone 2. I look at an aspirational figure in my life, Roger. He's close to 80 years old, and he lives like we were talking. He lives young. He's also somebody who did mountain biking for the last 30 years. He's one of the original guys, and they would go out for 3 to 5 hour rides twice a week, and they would just talk and go up these beautiful hills of Marin, and then they would do a little high intensity training in that ride for maybe 30 minutes. And they just sort of figured that out, what felt good. They were very much intuitive exercisers. And my friend Roger tells me, oh yeah, all my running friends, they're all broken down and they can't walk and they hobble around and we're all doing pretty well. So I think that they did get a lot of Zone 2 and it's led to good health and a lot of energy. I notice when I do Zone 2, I do have energy for life. It's just very time consuming. To do enough of it takes a lot of time. And so I am still refining my own personal relationship with what I want out of Zone 2, because that is a trade-off. If you're doing it right, you're doing a lot. You're getting in the miles, as they say. But I'd be curious to know your thoughts on that.
Well, I think the take home here is that you've got to pick a type of exercise that preserves the integrity of your musculoskeletal system.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the intensity zones per se. In that instance, he's doing something outdoors with a friend. All of those have independent positive effects. And it's less that he is working within certain heart rate or rating of perceived exertion ranges. And it's more that he's getting a bunch of different beneficial stimuli and he's not blowing out his joints in the process. And I think for most people, particularly people who have busy lives, who are short on time, they don't have time for zone 2. And they can get most of the cardiorespiratory benefits that they need from using some form of high intensity intermittent training, which could be HIIT intervals, it could be sprint interval training if they're very short on time. Or if they don't want to do cardiovascular training, and if we put aside the instance of someone who's got some sort of contraindicating medical condition, or a man who's trying to make a baby with his partner, the sauna is a great option because you get very similar cardiovascular responses. And using the sauna, as you know, because you've spoken with Jari Laukkanen, and I'm just giving myself more things to link to here, I'll link to that podcast as well, can produce impressive improvements in VO2 max or VO2 peak within a relatively short period, just tacking on a 15-minute sauna session in a traditional Finnish sauna on the end of a strength training workout. And that way you're getting all the beneficial load-related stimuli from the resistance training. You're getting the cardiovascular response from the sauna exercise, but you're also getting things that you would otherwise potentially struggle to get through the exercise training within that period of time, such as the fact that you do actually lose quite large amounts of certain toxins through your skin. Some people have described it as the third kidney. And Stephen,
I've never heard that. I like that.
Yeah, Stephen Genuis did his studies years ago looking at the concentrations of things like heavy metals in sweat, and they can be really hard to get out of your system. If you look at the half-life of something like cadmium, it's tens of years. So if you can lose some of that through sweating it out in the sauna, I think that's great.
I like that a lot. And what I would prioritize about any of these objective measures that reflect a scientific understanding of where the value of exercise come from, it is superseded by find movement that you enjoy and you like doing. And so my own perspective is one where that changes according to whatever I'm attracted to at that time. I do a lot of hot yoga now, and I like that. I do a lot of walking. I've maintained an average of over 10,000 steps for now 12 years, thanks to my Fitbit. And I intend to maintain that. And then I do in-tune training, and I'm playing around with a little blood flow restriction, but that's experimental just to see if I enjoy it. I do some VR boxing, which is fun. I do dance. And so what I don't like about the Zone 2 is it sort of eats up a lot of the time for doing everything, all that other stuff. And so, as you said, I mean, we think about Peter Attia. I think Peter Attia does really good work, but he, in my mind, is a maximalist, drives everybody towards where the maximal benefit is. The consequence of that is how hard it can be to do what is maximal when it's a rate of limiting returns. Where do you get that Pareto principle of 80% of the benefit? It could be at way less activity and is much more sustainable. And I think with the maximalist approach, you're going to drive more people away from doing anything because they will feel it's insufficient.
Yeah. And from my perspective, I get my Zone 2 twice a week, every week, and it's called carrying heavy shopping back from the supermarket. It might sound like I'm being facetious, but that does actually get your body in a very similar state. And it's something that somebody could do throughout their lifetime. It's going to be good for them economically. It's going to be good for the planet in terms of emissions. It's got all sorts of positive effects. And I think what people often miss when talking about these different types of interventions is the opportunity cost. And particularly if you have kids like you do, you're busy, you've got a demanding job, you can't spend 4 hours a week doing Zone 2. It makes no sense. It's making your life worse, arguably. But anyway, let's get off that high horse and move into the next question, unless you have something you want to say. Sorry.
Well, I love this conversation. I think it's something that people need to hear. It's good to understand how zone 2 can impact health. And I also think that zone 2 is an excellent exercise for certain things. And if somebody wanted to
Yep.
dedicate a period to
Hmm.
doing it, I would support that. It doesn't have to be the only way you conceive of and approach your exercise, your movement life. And also, like, I think it's a great exercise if you are feeling sick or you're recovering. It's low stress on the body. It helps. I feel more energized when I do it, so I use it periodically. And I currently try to get in one zone 2 exclusive training per week, and I might up that to 2 here and there, but that's based off of what I'm feeling like, where my energy is. Like, and what energy is much not physical but mental. Sometimes I just want to change up my routine, so that feels like a good way for this, for me to do this week, um, given other constraints in my life. So great conversation. I'm glad that we're discussing it. I hope some of these sound bites get out there.
Yeah, and to be clear, I also think that zone 2 can be very beneficial. And I think it makes a
Yeah,
huge amount of sense for endurance athletes in particular to concentrate much of their training volume on zone 2 training and to take a
absolutely.
largely polarized approach to their training sessions. So I'm not saying that it's not beneficial. I'm just saying that you always have to consider pros and cons. And I also think people spend way too much time micromanaging their nutrition and they don't do the same with their exercise. And nowadays, there are all these personalized nutrition companies. I love to see some more emphasis on personalized movement or personalized activity or personalized exercise. But
Yeah.
next, not very rapid fire question: Methyl- methylene blue or photobiomodulation?
Why not both, Greg?
Not allowed. Arbitrary rules, Dan.
Photobiomodulation.
Okay.
I think that has some interesting potential. Some work by Glenn Jeffrey is showing improvements in visual acuity that declines as we age and the restoration of that back towards youthful functioning. There's even some work that he's now done looking at a 10-minute session of photobiomodulation and its impact on glucose regulation. There are effects there, and we do not currently fully understand how to optimize around that given time constraints and methodologies. Does it have to be whole body? Can it be just, small photobiomodulation centers? If you do spend time outside, does that diminish the need for photobiomodulation, or is it
Yeah.
still, present? Um, so I'm excited to see more work in that area. Methylene blue is cool. It can, it has, I don't know where that necessarily fits into the priority of what you want to focus on, but obviously there's some cool companies out there like Transcriptions that are selling this now for cognitive enhancement. And, I've actually taken it before at different times and noticed some pretty impressive effects on working memory in particular. And then there's times where I haven't really noticed as much, but that's something that I kind of dabble with, but it's not, a kind of a key principle of my health. Where photobiomodulation might become more of a regular part of my health efforts going forward. I just have a lot to. I think we have a lot to learn. I have a lot to learn about how best to use that, when and why, how much.
Correct answer. Taurine, glycine, or creatine?
Yes, yes, and yes. I did a really great podcast with
Mm.
VJ Dev. He showed that there is a decline in taurine levels that then correlate with hallmarks of aging and age acceleration. And there's some evidence in animal models that if you restore taurine levels supplementally, that you might actually be able to ameliorate the progressive decline or advancement of some hallmarks of biological aging. And that's interesting to me. Uh, so it's a non-essential amino acid. It has um, why is this molecule in particular causing potentially these health span extending effects? I don't know, but there's also impressive effects on blood pressure and other things that I've seen before this health span work. So I do take it, and I take it with coffee, because the acute effect is that it acts more like theanine, and it is GABAergic, so it does have an impact on calming down that kind of higher end anxiety that a strong cup of coffee can make you feel. So I like that a lot. Glycine, very interesting. I also put that in my coffee. Well, I put collagen in my coffee because it has no impact on the taste. And I think collagen, which is high in glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline, those three amino acids, is important for recollagenation of tendons. Some interesting work on that we put out in our newsletter. Jimmy did not that long ago. And then creatine, our best man Tommy Wood's favorite supplement ever, is gaining a lot more popularity these days, as we understand. It's the impact that has on really all sorts of systems: immune function, recovery from inadequate sleep, muscle integrity. It's another substrate for energy production through the phosphocreatine system, and it might very well be the best brain supplement that, we talked earlier about utilizing the brain, so driving demands, doing cognitively demanding work. That's a lot easier when you have the energy to do that. So this could be a virtuous cycle here, where the more that we can enable the brain to have the energy it needs, if we match that with cognitively demanding, fun types of tasks, socialization, picking up a new hobby, those two could go hand in hand to create better brain performance as we age. So I'll say yes is my answer.
It's not allowed, but you're
Damn.
forgiven, not forgotten. Okay. Brief responses, Dan. Lithium lithium orotate or lithium aspartate? Any thoughts?
None.
Okay.
I do not have any thoughts on that.
Next question. I know that you love a phytochemical.
I do.
This is probably the nerdiest question I've ever asked, and these words I never thought would pass my lips. But what is your favorite polyphenol?
Hydroxytyrosol.
Oh wow, you're an olive oil guy.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I'm impressed by some of the stuff that I've seen before that on with blood pressure, but also with impact on intelligence. Even some work looking at olive oil consumers. I take Olivey, which is a very highly concentrated form of olive oil that's more medicinal than it is of food. I like the taste of it. Samara, my wife, does not. It's pretty expensive. It's $30 for about 17 servings, so close to $2 a serving. But it claims to have 1 tablespoon of Olivey is equivalent to 30 of regular olive oil. It comes from Morocco, from an arid part of Morocco that doesn't use pesticides in the growth of the olives, and they're used in the first harvest to make this product, and it's used in clinical trials. So that's one thing that I really like about it. But I actually noticed an effect from it where I don't with just regular olive oil. I feel great when I take it. Like it's a very noticeable effect on cognition. It just makes me feel clear-minded.
I need some of that. Have you come across any new polyphenols recently? And when I say new, I mean new to you, that you find especially interesting?
I haven't been doing as much research into this area of recent, so I guess the answer is no. But Ginny just did share a paper with me on polyphenol consumption and mortality risk, looking at the impact of high polyphenol consumption versus low polyphenol consumption, and its real effect in epidemiology on outcomes of reduced morbidity and mortality. So, I'm a fan. These are non-essential plant phytochemicals that have an important effect on our physiology that can extend lifespan in some ways. They act in some of those hormetic mechanisms by creating subtoxic doses that drive increased it drives an adaptive capacity so that we can handle stress better, and They upregulate glutathione systems in the body. They also activate through the stress that is caused by activating this NRF2 pathway. They also will elicit or stimulate gene products that are helpful in cancer suppression. So it's, there's real effects, and there's cool estimates that the amount of plants that hunter-gatherers consume, were numerous just by having a diverse diet. And even if we eat a lot of plants, the diversity is limited compared to hunter-gatherers. So I like the idea of finding good sources in the diet. Food is probably better than supplements. Really, with supplements and nutraceuticals, those are basically drugs. What do I mean by that? A supplement, in my mind, is something that is helping to provide a nutrient in a physiological relevant quantity, where we can now extract, let's say, tyrosine or resveratrol or hydroxytyrosol from a plant and deliver that in supraphysiologic doses, and doses that we would not be exposed to in nature, even if we had high diversity or just ate one plant all day long. So they're drugs. We don't call them that, but they are. And that's okay. I'm not opposed to those things, but they also come with risks. So we might be doing more harm than good. We might be fostering. You see studies with looking at ECGCs from green tea, matcha, that are consumed in pill form that cause liver disease because it's such a high concentration of a stressful molecule that it exceeds the boundaries of what your liver can handle, and you actually are stressing out your liver. I probably am guilty of doing that myself as I've played around with different compounds, but that valuable, find sources of diversity, do things like olive oil and teas, be careful with the doses. The people that construct the best formulations, in my mind, of polyphenol or plant phytonutrient chemicals are using doses that are way smaller than you see in other brands that are more common, or more doses that are more common from popular brands. So just be cautious there.
What's your favorite source of global news?
I am enjoying, I like right now the All In podcast, which is Chamath, David Sachs, Jason Calcanis, and David Freeberg. So these are tech entrepreneurs who are very successful, well-known, articulate. The reason I sought it out is because it actually has more conservative perspectives through one of the guests, David Sachs. And I like that. I think wherever you sit on the political spectrum, it's good to seek out well-constructed opinions that articulate what the other side thinks, that do so well. What I particularly like with politics is when a person shares their perspective and isn't swayed so much by what side they are on, but they might align mostly with, let's say, a liberal perspective, but then on any individual point, they might align with a conservative perspective in that moment, and they don't have to feel like they have to adjust their response to fit into a narrative. I feel like Sachs can do that at times, where Chamath is actually pretty good at just telling you what he thinks. And I listen to anybody who's like, this is how I think the world should work, and this is what's going to be better for the world, and here's why. I want to hear that. And I don't. So that's sort of like where I'm getting news right now, because they're commenting on current events, and you hear the roundtable of their thoughts, and I actually feel fairly informed. So that's been my source of news in some way, probably over the last couple of months. And I want to make a hat tip to my buddy Jeff Kendall, who turned me onto that show. I used to work with Jeff at Restore. Great dude.
I was going to ask you Trump or Biden, but I'm going to refrain from doing so at the risk of being hyper-inflammatory. What is your favorite Anthony Bourdain episode?
Maybe when he went to Morocco, actually. I don't know why. It was great. It's such a great guy, in that he seemed to be able to sit down with anybody, and his personal charisma was such where he just, obviously we know that he was dealing with a lot of mental health issues, but that enabled him also to sort of say, fuck it, and just go anywhere and do anything, almost because he just didn't seem to have a care about whether he survived the situation or not. There's the dark side to that, was his eventual suicide, which I'm very mirthful of. But he also in his life, it enabled a conversation and a way of living that was really unconstrained in a way. And I think that's why so many people found him appealing.
And then one last small question: free will or determinism?
I haven't read Sapolsky's new book, so whatever he decides is right. I'll just go with that.
Okay.
Have
You don't
you read?
I have, yeah. You don't have free will, Dan. Then that's the punchline.
Okay, good. All right, great. Thanks for. Now I don't have to read the book.
And I'll also actually just mention that you turned me on to Sapolsky's best book, and there is only one best Sapolsky book, and it is not Behave, and it is not Determined. It is, in fact, a primate's memoir.
Agreed.
After a brief interlude, courtesy of Ivor, which was right on cue, I just want to end down by asking you about fatherhood. You mentioned your dad a few times, and you are a father to 3 little ones. Poor Samara, they're all boys.
Yes.
And I imagine that it's pretty challenging raising young people nowadays, not being a parent myself. What are some of the things that are on your mind when it comes to trying to raise your boys to be healthy in the modern world?
It hasn't felt like too much of a challenge yet. And I say that because all of my boys are at a time where they're still very close to us and operating less independently in the world. So, yes, Desmond, our soon to be 11-year-old, and one day tomorrow, he engages with technology. He plays video games with his friends, and I try to balance the social benefit of having him play those games, also some recognition that there's some cognitive benefit of that engagement. And I watch him do it, and he's so engaged, and he's thinking, and they're collaborating, and they're solving problems with a sole desire to live on a screen, which we know is a risk. So I think my mind is the way to do this is to develop humans that have a diversity of interests. Sports is a great way to do that. He also is an artist, so we've encouraged that in him, which is something that he gravitated to and he really enjoys doing. So he brings his drawing book everywhere, and he draws. Generally, I'm not a type of parent that wants to prevent exposure entirely, but rather teach the right types of usage with technology. So I recently started an Instagram account for Desmond. Why did I do that? There's evidence that that's not a great thing. Well, because of jujitsu, what I found is that community in particular is very supportive. So you will see kids that have Instagram accounts at 10 years old, and they comment on their competitors in a way that's very, very supportive. So it's usually the parents that are making the comments, but I had a very challenging match versus X person who's an excellent practitioner out of this school, and I'd like to congratulate him on his win. I'm going to keep training. It's motivated me to do my best. And so in a way, I feel like you have an opportunity to teach good manners and how to interact well on social media. And then he doesn't have any free time with Instagram. So what we do is we'll sit down together and do it maybe a half an hour a week. We might make a post. We might look at stuff related to jiu-jitsu or soccer or some funny things that I've seen and sent to him. And so what I'm doing is it's very much under our control, and I'm trying to set the right pattern of behavior on it. How to communicate respectfully. We haven't really dealt with any challenges of disrespect, but that will come up, and he'll be able to process those. We'll process them together. So it's like teaching him how to use it versus trying to just prevent his usage, because usage is inevitable. And I'd rather him have a healthy relationship with these things than no relationship and then all of a sudden, having to develop that relationship on his own. I think you're just delaying the problem that way. So that's sort of my philosophy with children overall. And then otherwise, I try to give each one of my boys personal time every day. And it doesn't have to be that much because you're in the group a lot, and so you're acting as a group. But then with each one of them, 3 to 5 minutes of just really good personal time. Everybody else is out of the room. It's just you and me and him. And I find that that's really important for just feeling connected.
I love that. And with that, Dan, we will wrap things up. But I just want to say a huge thank you for everything that you've contributed in recent years and for all the good times that we've had together too. And I have all sorts of links that I'll provide in the show notes. Right. But is there anything that you'd like to mention? I know that you've been working on your new project, Vivendi. So this seems an opportune time to plug that if you'd like.
Yeah, so Vivendi is a high-touch health coaching business that I started after I left my last job as the chief health officer for Restore. And it was inspired by the encouragement of a friend who said, I really want to connect you with people that I know because you're my health coach in effect, because we're friends. And I think you provide something really valuable here. And I think you should consider this. And he badgered me for years about it. And I respect him a lot. And so finally I was like, maybe I'll think about that. And we went back earlier to some of the learnings from our history, some of the enduring principles that we can gain from ancient times. And one thing that we've learned is just working with individuals versus just in the ivory tower, you're having your nose in a paper. And so what I wanted to do is figure out what would it if I'm acting as a first version of a health performance expert, what is the optimal situation in order to help an adult who's developed a relationship with the world do better? And so it actually uses a lot of my skills that I've developed in my career from various roles. Understanding individuals, how do you speak with them? What is their optimal way to learn? How do you deal with challenges or disagreements? How do you frame information? And it's different from person to person. And some people are less ready than others to grow. There's still sort of this expectation at times for you to be the outsourced version. What you know is somehow enabling me by association, not by personal development, to be better. And working with people to say, no, my job is to make you better at these things. And people have different capacities there. But my point is it's very stimulating. We work with a limited number of people. It is expensive just because we only have so much time. There could be a goal in the future to figure out some way to scale to more folks. I'm not overly focusing on that now. I'm focusing on what's ideal for an individual, and I want to keep it narrow so that I'm not thinking about how to spend less time on my clients, but actually give them as much time as needed. And I have to say that I'm really, really enjoying it because it's where the rubber meets the road. And with working on Human West for a long time and discussing science at a level that I thought was for a normal individual who's interested in science and not a scientist, working directly with individuals is just another step, and it's quite enjoyable. So yeah, Vivendi Health. And then, I would say parting words is, I'm optimistic about the future of health. I know that we're having this rising challenge of how much technology changes how we live, but I see really good interventions out there, and a lot of them are stuff that's within our grasp right now. So I couldn't be more excited about the work at Vivendi because I feel like it's the place where you have the most opportunity, and that might be true for longer than we expect. So we think of these things as fundamentals as like, it's a little boring. It's not. It is hard, interesting, challenging, and fun work. So I'm feeling good about where I am in my career, what life is like, and probably in a few years from now, I'll probably look at how to adjust that or grow it. But I'm not spending too much time in the future. I'm spending more time in the present.
The man with the plan. Thank you very much, Stan.
Thank you, Greg. That was great.